Fran Brown gave his initial thoughts about playing Tennessee in week 1. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in the Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, Syracuse head coach Fran Brown called the ACC the conference of quarterbacks. Plus, he said that Syracuse has the toughest non-conference schedule in the country. We'll break down what all that means later on in the show. But first, Fran Brown gave his thoughts about playing Tennessee in week 1. Let's get right to it. Syracuse football, they opened the season on Saturday, August 30th in a neutral site game down in Atlanta, Georgia against the Tennessee Volunteers. And Fran Brown made sure to pay a ton of respect to Tennessee. And I don't think this should come to anyone's surprise that Fran Brown would have nothing but amazing things to say about the Tennessee Volunteers at ACC Media Day, which was yesterday, Wednesday, July 23rd. Coach Brown, he called Tennessee a blue blood of college football. He also discussed how Tennessee, especially early on in the season, blows a lot of teams out. And over the past couple of seasons against the ACC, he is exactly right. Because in 2024, Tennessee beat NC State, which at the time, I believe NC State was a ranked team. People thought that NC State was going to be a good team last year. Well, Tennessee made light work of them. They beat NC State 51-10 in week 2. And if you go back to 2023, Tennessee beat Virginia of the ACC 49-13 in week 1. So, of course, if you're Syracuse, you got to make sure you put your best foot forward against Tennessee because, as Coach Fran Brown is saying, they do blow teams out early on in the season against the ACC, especially over the past couple of seasons. Coach Fran Brown also called Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel one of the top 5 best head coaches in college football. But for the most part, Fran Brown was mainly speaking about how his team needs to focus on itself rather than Tennessee. So let's break this all down. First of all, there's no bulletin board material here. Absolutely none. And why would Fran Brown give Tennessee any sort of bulletin board material? I know coaches and players don't think this way, but at least for us, if you go check the odds on FanDuel right now, Tennessee is a 12.5-point favorite to beat Syracuse. Yeah, an opponent that's more than a 2-touchdown favorite to you, probably want to pay them some respect. You do not want to give them any sort of bulletin board material. Now, you can be confident in yourself, but you don't want to put down anyone on Tennessee. So Fran Brown is essentially taking the page out of every head coach's playbook, which is do nothing but give high praise to your opponent before you play them. Like Bill Belichick, for example, when he was with the New England Patriots, used to always compliment the New York Jets. And as a New York Jets fan, that drives me insane because he would just troll the New York Jets the entire time. But now he's at North Carolina. We wish him nothing but the best, right? So for the most part, Fran Brown is doing what most people do. He's not doing what Thomas Castellanos of Florida State is doing, which is call out Alabama. That is a recipe for disaster for Thomas Castellanos. He is a big moron, and he's probably going to lose by 30 to 40 points in week 1, but that's neither here nor there. So Fran Brown, he's paying Tennessee nothing but respect. He's giving them absolutely no bulletin board material to work with, which is a good thing. We do not want to wake up Tennessee. We hope that they can sleep on Syracuse a little bit. But more importantly, he's absolutely right about the team needs to focus on themselves rather than Tennessee right now. Yes, Tennessee is the first game of the season, and the first game is quickly approaching, right? We're about a month and a week away. So we're 5 weeks away from week 1 against Tennessee. But that's still 37 days from now. And if you think about it, you don't really plan for a specific opponent until about a week before the opponent, right? You want to simulate a game week. You don't move on to the next opponent until you're done with the opponent that is in front of you. But right now, if you're 37 days away from the start of the season and you want to sit here and say, okay, we're going to simulate a game week before Tennessee, obviously. So we're going to give us a week to prepare for them. Well, then if you're Syracuse and you're Tennessee for that matter, you still got 30 days to get better as individuals and as a team. Syracuse needs to focus on themselves and getting better and living in the present rather than thinking about the future, which is Tennessee. I think that is the right mindset to have. And again, Tennessee is probably doing the same thing. How much preparation do you think Tennessee is doing right now, specifically for Syracuse? Probably not much. Tennessee's got their own things they got to worry about. I mean, who's going to be their starting quarterback? Probably Joey Aguilar, the transfer from Appalachian State, but they got a quarterback battle of their own right now. So both teams, it is in their best interest to focus more on themselves than the opponent coming up in week 1. Now, obviously, maybe you do a little bit of scouting, right? You don't want to completely write off Tennessee, but for the most part, you got to think about yourselves. And Fran Brown made that a point of emphasis at ACC Media Day on Wednesday. But for us, we're really focusing on Tennessee a lot. And for good reason, especially for Syracuse. This is the most intriguing week 1 opponent that this program has had in a very long time. I'm not exaggerating here. Now, you might agree or disagree with it, but Tennessee is definitely up there. Comment in the comment section below. But just recently for Syracuse, some of the opponents that they have opened up against. Last year, there was a lot of hype, but it was more so of a new era. It was Fran Brown. You got Kyle McCord coming in from Ohio State, a hotshot quarterback, right? But the opponent was Ohio. And no disrespect to the Ohio Bobcats, but it's the Ohio Bobcats. Sorry. 2023, Syracuse opened up against Colgate. In 2022, they actually opened up against Louisville. That was a big-time game to open the season. Malik Cunningham was one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. At least a lot of people thought that in the preseason. A lot of hype, a lot of expectations, and then Syracuse just blew out Louisville. But I think there's more hype for this game against Tennessee than that one. 2021 was at Ohio. 2020 at North Carolina. North Carolina was a top 20 team in the country. They did have Sam Howell at quarterback, but honestly, the last time Syracuse played a week 1 game that I think is on the magnitude of the one that they are about to play against Tennessee, I think you got to go all the way back to 2013 when Syracuse opened up against Penn State. But at the end of the day, with all that being said, yes, myself and probably many of you are going to be thinking about that week 1 game against Tennessee because we're so excited. It's almost there. We're 5 weeks away from the start of the college football season for Syracuse. We're pumped up. They're coming off a 10-win season. They got a second-year head coach. Looks like is the real deal. You see the recruiting classes in the future. But right now, this team needs to focus on just getting better every day. And then there will be a time and place to really start game planning against the Tennessee Volunteers. What are your thoughts on what Fran Brown had to say about Tennessee in week 1? Comment in the comments section below. Do you like how he's giving them no bulletin board material? Do you agree with me on that? Or would you like him to perhaps maybe throw a little shade at them? I don't know. Maybe you feel a little bit differently. That's why I want you to comment in the comment section below. Now, coming up, does Syracuse have the toughest non-conference schedule in the country? Well, we're going to talk about that next on Locked On Syracuse. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following along the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? Perhaps you go to a baseball game with a few of your buddies, and going to a baseball game is really, really exciting, especially in the beginning portion of that game. But then you start getting to kind of the middle of a baseball game, and it can kind of feel like a little bit of a drag. And then you got all these pitching changes and everything like that. That's maybe the perfect time to pull up FanDuel and perhaps place a live same game parlay. And guess what? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Does Syracuse football have the toughest non-conference schedule in the country for 2025? Well, whatever your opinion is, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but just so you know, head coach Fran Brown certainly believes that the Orange have the toughest non-conference schedule in the entire nation for this upcoming season. Quick run through of Syracuse's non-conference opponents for 2025 in case you haven't checked the schedule in a while, or maybe this is your first time tuning in to Locked On Syracuse and you haven't already heard me say the schedule. Non-conference opponents this season, in order in which they will happen, you got Tennessee, neutral site game, followed by UConn, Colgate, and then at Notre Dame, which will take place in late November. It is definitely up there among the toughest non-conference schedules in the country, and I don't think there's any doubt with that. There's other teams with great non-cons too. Clemson is playing LSU, and they always play against South Carolina, so that's a tough non-con. Florida State, don't think they're going to be that great anyway, but they got Alabama and Florida they got to worry about. I mean, Alabama in particular, my goodness, Thomas Castellanos, again, he is just going to get lit up. I feel bad for the kid because he's talking so much smack and they're going to lose by 100. But anyway, that's Florida State. Tulane, I was surprised. They low-key have a very tough non-conference schedule. Ole Miss, I don't think Ole Miss is a team you want to sleep on in the SEC. And then Duke. Duke, to me, is a sleeper in the ACC. If you caught the latest ACC squad, which premiered at 5 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube, and if you're listening to this right now in audio, it will come out at 5 p.m. Eastern, you'll hear me say that. I think Duke is one of the big sleepers in the ACC. No one's really talking about them being a really good team because they're pretty similar to Syracuse. They have a second-year head coach in Manny Diaz, at least with Duke. Manny Diaz did have prior head coaching experience, but at least with Duke. And in his first year with Duke, they went 9-3 in the regular season, just like Syracuse. And they just paid a quarterback a lot of money than Darian Mensah. But Syracuse's non-conference schedule, to get back to them, it's definitely up there. It definitely stacks up with any other team in the nation in their non-conference. But what does this really mean? I think this is Fran Brown trying to get Syracuse football more respect. He's letting the world know that Syracuse is not a program that's going to back down from challenges outside of their conference. They're not going to be Indiana and cancel home and homes against Virginia, of all teams. Not Virginia basketball, Virginia football. That was ridiculous what Indiana's saying. Then he's like, oh, we're going to copy the SEC in their scheduling. No. Some SEC teams actually play against legitimate non-conference, out-of-conference opponents. I mean, Georgia last year opened the year against Clemson. South Carolina plays Clemson every year. Alabama, I mean, they're playing Florida State. I know Florida State is not supposed to be very good this year, but Florida State traditionally is very good, and you're not supposed to know that 5 years in advance whenever they scheduled that matchup. But Syracuse is not going to be one of those teams that ducks opponents outside of the ACC. And this is probably a good thing because let's all be honest here. about the ACC. At least nationally, they do not get a lot of respect as a football conference, and they're losing the respect now as a basketball conference. But we're going to talk about football here, right? We know that if there's an SEC team and an ACC team with the exact same record, who the committee is probably going to favor. It just is what it is. Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, there is clearly a bias. That's for the SEC, for the Big Ten to an extent, and against the ACC. And so if you're Syracuse or any other ACC team, you kind of have to schedule tough non-conferences. I mean, in future schedules, this is who Syracuse is going to play. They're going to play against one really tough opponent for the next, including this year, for the next 5 years. Because if you look at their future schedules, 2026, Syracuse is going to play Notre Dame. It will be at home, but they are playing Notre Dame. In 2027, Syracuse is going to go on the road and play Penn State. In 2028, Syracuse is going to play Penn State, but it'll be at home for the Orange. And then in 2029, Notre Dame once again comes back to town. So Syracuse again is going to play against one tough non-conference opponent every year, as they should. So if and when the time comes, and hopefully it's as soon as this season, nobody looks at Syracuse and says, nah, they didn't play anybody. That's why they had their record. They played nobody. They went 9-3 because they played the bottom of the ACC, and that's that. No, they're playing a very difficult schedule. Whether or not you agree it's the toughest in the country as far as non-conference is debatable, right? There's other teams that have tough non-cons, and comment in the comment section below whether you think Syracuse does have it or not, but they have to schedule a tough non-conference because they know that the ACC in general is not going to get a lot of respect. It's just not. So you have to beat teams outside of the ACC to get that respect for if and when the time comes, which will hopefully be this season. It also leads me back to last year. I didn't have a problem with Syracuse at 9-3 not getting much consideration for the college football playoff because, quite frankly, they didn't really deserve it. They didn't. But this year, if they go 9-3, I think they deserve it. They would deserve strong consideration for the college football playoff by looking at their out-of-conference schedule, by looking at who they're playing in the ACC. They're playing all the tough teams in the ACC this year. Syracuse is not going to back down from anyone. Will they win? I guess time will tell. Now, coming up, the ACC is the conference of quarterbacks. Let's talk about it. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we still got plenty more to talk about here on today's show. Fran Brown calling the ACC the conference of quarterbacks. But before we do so, just want to thank you all for making it to this point of the podcast. I hope that means you enjoy the podcast. And if you haven't done so already, if you could just do me this favor, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And of course, shout out to all of you to continue to like and subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all are truly the best. All right, let's get back to it. So Fran Brown, head coach of Syracuse football at ACC Media Day, called the ACC the conference of quarterbacks. What does this mean? It's pretty similar to what we discussed in the last segment. Fran Brown is pumping up the ACC here as in general as a conference, and he's also pumping up Syracuse. From an ACC standpoint, it goes back to the respect we talked about in the second segment of this show. If you're head coach Fran Brown or any head coach in the ACC, you want to be doing everything in your power to let the world know how strong the conference is. And so you will take literally everything the conference has and wear it with pride, right? Because you want that respect. So if and when the time comes, and we're talking about 2 to 3 teams from different conferences, you want the ACC to get that, I guess, preferential treatment, if you will, or you want to feel like you're getting what you ultimately deserve. And so ultimately, you need to make a case as to why your conference is great. You don't necessarily need to put down other conferences, but you need to show people why your conference is really good. So Fran Brown pumping up the ACC, saying it's the conference of quarterbacks. And whether he's right or wrong is to be debated. I mean, the ACC pretty consistently puts out some quality quarterbacks into the National Football League. They've had some number 1 picks very recently, right? Trevor Lawrence comes to mind. I mean, literally Cam Ward in this past draft from Miami went number 1 overall. It's definitely up there with conferences and quarterbacks. And this season, they definitely have some pretty good ones. They do. Forget Syracuse for a moment. I mean, you got Cade Klubnik, who might win the Heisman Trophy over at Clemson, Carson Beck, Darian Mensah, Kevin Jennings, Haynes King, Miller Moss, Eli Holstein, so many quarterbacks that are really talented in the ACC. And guess what? Syracuse is playing most of the guys that I just mentioned. So not only is Syracuse this season playing arguably the toughest non-conference schedule in the country, at least Fran Brown believes the toughest non-conference schedule in the country with Tennessee and Notre Dame on it, they are also playing all the top quarterbacks in the ACC this season. So again, if this team manages to go 9-3, which I feel is the ceiling, I think if everything breaks right, Syracuse football can win 9 games. I really do, because winning 9 games on this schedule means they could still lose to Notre Dame, they could still lose to Clemson, and they could still lose to Tennessee, because that's 3 losses right there. So I believe the ceiling for Syracuse is ultimately 9 wins. But even if Syracuse, let's say, gets to 9 wins, which again is the ceiling for this team, in my opinion, they're still going to beat some really, really good opponents. Miami, Georgia Tech, SMU, all on the road with very, very talented quarterbacks. I guess kind of pending on Miami a little bit. All accounts, Carson Beck is healthy. So I think they're going to be a good team. But if he's not healthy, we'll definitely know by that point in the season. Would 9-3 be good enough for a college football playoff, barring some last-minute college expansion, which isn't going to happen? Again, it's the cliche. Time will tell. But I want to turn it over to you. Do you think that the ACC is the conference of quarterbacks, as Fran Brown said? And do you believe that 9-3 for Syracuse is the ceiling? And if that would be good enough for Syracuse to make the college football playoff in 2025? Comment in the comment section below your thoughts. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, tomorrow we got Poll Friday, which is where do you have Syracuse football finishing in the ACC? And I love how we're doing that this Friday. And the reason is because we're all going to have an opinion on it, right? I think the voting is done by now. We're going to discuss it on the show. And then the ACC media poll will actually be released. So we'll be able to reference the two of them. Where we have Syracuse finishing in the ACC is a Syracuse fan base for the most part, and where the media nationally has Syracuse finishing in the conference. So it'll be a little preview for that full podcast we'll do once the ACC media poll does in fact come out. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. And hey, if you want a more national opinion on what's going to happen with college football, you could check out the Locked On College Football podcast as well. You can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. And if you could just do me a favor, tell one or two of your closest Syracuse friends about the Locked On Syracuse podcast so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And my goodness, we are just 5 weeks away from the start of the Syracuse football season. I will see you all again soon.